Daddo.
What time is it?
Showtime.
What show?
Our show. The Ethan and Daddo Show. Attention, it's the Ethan and Daddo Show. Hello. It's the Ethan and Daddo Show. Welcome to the Ethan and Daddo Show. How are you doing?
I'm good, buddy, but as you know, this week's episode is a little bit awkward, am I right?
Yeah.
You and I have a great working relationship. We're co-hosts. I'm your father, but we're in the middle of our House presidential election. You and I are running against each other for House president.
Yeah.
You're the current House president. Somehow you got Mom to vote for you last year. I'm challenging you, and unfortunately it's been a little bit of negative campaigning, right?
Yeah.
I may have started that because I caught you wearing your brand new sneakers in bed, sleeping in them under the covers, and I thought the voters have a right to know that this is the person that wants to run the House. You've been campaigning negatively about me, right?
Yeah.
What have you been saying?
You've been eating gummies and chips and pizza and unhealthy stuff and blaming it on other people that is in your office.
Well, you do like to sift through my trash can to look for things to incriminate me. I call that dirty politics, but I'm hoping that we can put that aside for today and be professional because we have a very exciting episode. Am I right?
Yeah.
Because there is another election coming up on the same day as our election. What election's that?
The presidential election.
President of what?
The USA.
And who is running for president of the USA?
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Exactly. And you know a bit about the election, but it's kind of complicated. And we thought maybe we'd do an episode where you and other kids can learn a bit more about how presidential elections work. Good idea?
Yeah.
And I think we've got the guy to help us, a guy who probably knows more about presidential elections than just about anyone on the planet. On November 5th, 2 weeks from today, he'll go on TV as the results are coming in, and he won't stop. He'll stay on TV until either we have a president or until he passes out, whichever comes first. He is the master of the big board, NBC News and MSNBC political correspondent. What's his name?
Steve Kornacki.
Say it again.
Steve Kornacki.
Welcome to the show, Steve Kornacki.
Thank you, although I'm nervous. I didn't know the dirty tricksters were going to be interviewing me here.
Well, we're going to try to keep this professional if we can, but as you know, campaigns can get a bit dirty. So we were watching some videos last night together of you in previous elections, and as Ethan found out, you can be on TV for a long time. These races go on and on as the results come in, and as it gets later and later, you get more tired. Some silly things can kind of happen. You get excited. And what are some of the things you saw, Ethan?
You had a broken arm, and you were trying to do a TV show while eating paper with a broken arm.
In fairness, he wasn't trying to eat paper, but all the numbers are coming in at the same time, and I think he didn't realize he had a piece of paper in his mouth. But talk to us about election night and when things are coming in fast and furious, and how exciting is that for you?
Yeah, no, again, speaking of dirty tricks, I don't eat paper, no matter what the dirt you've dug up there. But that, you're right. I forgot about that. That was a while back, actually. There was an election one time where I had a cast on my left hand, so I'm trying to hold all this stuff at one time, and I had to use my mouth, and unfortunately, I came on the air. I wasn't really planning on that, but hopefully, nothing like that will happen this time around. And but I think that's also an example, kind of what happens up there sometimes. So much, as you say, is happening. So much is coming in. I'm trying to process it. I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to figure out what I want to tell people, how I want to tell them. And I get excited in the moment because it's who doesn't get excited when there's a new information coming in and there's a little suspense. What's it going to say? What's it going to mean? And you're kind of getting to I think. Hopefully, if I'm doing this right, when you're watching at home, you're experiencing the same things I'm experiencing, and we're experiencing them together. We're watching these results come in. We don't know what's going to happen, and we're just finding out piece by piece, state by state, and trying to, it's almost like following a breadcrumb trail or something, till we get to the end.
Ethan just turned 8 years old recently, and so he's starting to get into elections, and so we kind of wanted to know.
When did you get interested in elections?
I was way too young. I was probably, not much older than you are now. And back then, I think it's different now. I think more people are interested in politics. I think more people talk about politics. But when I was your age and I started to get interested in it, there were not a lot of people like me. So, I could remember, presidential elections when I was growing up that I was very eager to talk to people about, and I would try to talk to them about it, and they could not get away from me fast enough because it was boring to them. And I think it's different now.
It's much cooler now to be into presidential elections. And now we have an exciting moment because Ethan and I obviously do the show together. Julia is our show announcer and theme song singer. Mom has never appeared on the podcast. Ethan, she had a question, and Ethan is insisting that she ask the question herself for the first time on the podcast. Here's Mom with a question.
Whoa.
Hi, Steve.
Heather.
I'm curious, have you ever run for class president in school?
I did. I served one tumultuous term as my high school class president, and then I was voted out of office.
Ooh, what was the big issue that led to your downfall?
Mismanagement of the prom.
Ooh. All right. Well, that sounds like a whole nother episode. I was not expecting that answer. So, Ethan, you'd mentioned one time that maybe I should think about running for president, which is very kind of you considering that we're political adversaries. But I told you there are certain rules. I technically qualify to be president. I am unqualified in some of the other areas. But, Steve, there are a few rules that qualifications you have to have legally to be allowed to run for president, right?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one is you've got to be at least 35 years old. And you've got to be, well, I don't want to get too technical here. You have to be, what it says, the rules in the Constitution say you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States. So, I mean, basically just, you're a citizen and you were born here, where it gets a little bit dicey, but it's fine. Because if you were born to American citizen parents who were living in Europe or something when you were born, there's I think it's pretty much been resolved that counts too.
All right. And then there's some other things that are unofficial qualifications. So I appreciate your confidence in me, buddy, but there are a lot of things lacking on my resume to be president. We've talked about, what a president is in charge of a country, right? Runs a country. A governor is in charge of a state, and a mayor is in charge of a city, right? We've talked about that. So is there, Steve, a typical job that a president has had on their resume, something they've already done that is often, they come from all different places. Donald Trump was a businessman. Kamala Harris is vice president now. Is there one job that tends to give people the best chance of becoming president?
Well, yeah, you mentioned Donald Trump is very different, than previous presidents we've had because he did not hold office. He didn't have any of those jobs that you're describing before he became president. That's very uncommon. Usually the president is somebody, as you're saying, who was, Joe Biden, what was he before he became president? Well, for a long time, almost 40 years, he was a senator. He was a senator from the state of Delaware. And then he became the vice president. Barack Obama picked him to be the vice president. And those were the jobs he held before he became president. Kamala Harris, obviously the vice president now. She was a senator before she became the vice president. A common one we've seen in the past, although it's been a little while right now, is governor of a state. So if you went back a little ways here, Bill Clinton was president of the United States in the 1990s. What was he before he was president? He was the governor of the state of Arkansas. And before him, Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. He had been the governor of the state of California. And he'd actually been a movie actor before that. He was an actor who became the governor of California and then president of the United States. And Jimmy Carter, who just turned 100 years old. He's still alive. He was president in the late 70s, early 80s. He'd been the governor of Georgia. So a while ago, people thought that's the magic trick. Be the governor. That's how you can become a president. But we haven't seen it in a while.
Maybe a kid podcaster will go on to be president. What do you think?
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about polls last night. So one thing that Steve does leading up to the election is he looks at the polls to see who is in theory, winning. And it's hard to predict, but we talked about if you want to know who's in the lead, you can't go ask everybody in the country who are you planning to vote for. That would be impossible to do. So you get smaller groups of people that hopefully represent the country. And I said to you, and you said, I said, you have to get all different kinds of people. And you said, Dad, but people are people. And I said, that's true, but different groups of people sometimes tend to vote certain ways. So like you wouldn't want to do, unless you're trying to just do a poll of men, you wouldn't want to have just men. You'd want to have men and women in the poll to get an example of how different types of people might vote. And then you said something about, well, then you want people of different races. And you said, and people who are Jewish and people who celebrate Kwanzaa. You came up with all that, right?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. So I think we're curious about how is it possible and how accurate can these polls be? How do you come up with a group of people that represents the entire country to try to have an idea of who's winning?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It's gotten tougher, and we're not entirely sure. As one of the big questions in this election is, are the polls going to be reliable? Or are we going to wake up after this election is over and say, wow, those polls were totally wrong. Trump was actually way ahead, or Harris was actually way ahead. And that's because in the last two presidential elections, the polls were pretty far off what the actual election result was. In the last two elections, the polls showed Trump doing a lot worse than he actually did in the election. So one of the questions this time around is that going to happen again? Are there just, there's all sorts of ideas about why that happened, but could that happen again? Could it turn out that there's a lot of Trump supporters who, for some reason or another, are not being people who take polls are not, able to get in touch with? Possible. Happened the last two times. It's also possible the pollsters this time around might not be able to get in touch with all of the Harris supporters. It might be something totally different. So I think, though, the confidence in polling, because of the last two presidential elections, people aren't as confident in them as before. And it's much more of a question in this election about how accurate they are.
I think we both want to know right now. We want to know who's winning, right?
Yeah.
If the election were to happen today, we're 2 weeks away, who would win, right?
Yeah.
And I would tell you, take a coin out and flip the coin. Because half the time it's going to be heads, and half the time it's going to be tails, and you don't know which one. And I think this election is the same way. It's so close right now that I wouldn't be surprised if Harris won, and I wouldn't be surprised if Trump won. And some days I wake up and I look at what's out there in the campaign and the polls, and I say, yeah, I think maybe Trump's got the advantage. And some days I wake up and I look at all of that and I say, I think maybe Harris has got the advantage. So this one is, there have been elections in the past where, we're getting pretty close to it right now, where you kind of knew who was going to win. It was pretty clear who had the advantage. That's not the case this time.
Ethan, and this is where it gets a little complicated for kids. And Steve, I don't know if there's an easy way for you to explain this. Probably not. It can be complicated for adults too. But Ethan, what did I tell you? I told you that someone could get more votes than anyone else, but
lose.
How is that possible?
Well, it's possible because we have something called the Electoral College. And I think the thing to keep in mind is when you're voting in a presidential election, you're really voting in a state election, whatever state it is that you live in. And the way the Electoral College works is, if a candidate, let's say the state is Kansas, okay? So the presidential candidate who gets the most votes in Kansas gets all of the electoral votes that Kansas has. And the number of electoral votes that a state has is based on how big or how small the state is. So a state like California, just the biggest state in the country, more people live there than any other state, massive, has more than 50 electoral votes. Now, a state like Vermont, which is one of the smallest states in the country, has 3 electoral votes. That's as small as it can get. But the point is, whatever state you live in, you're basically voting in a presidential election in that state. And whoever wins your state gets whatever electoral votes your state has. And then whoever gets the most electoral votes wins the presidency. And so it's possible that if you added up all of the votes in all of the different states for one candidate, might actually have the most votes overall like that, but not the most electoral college votes, if that makes any sense.
That's a great explanation, right?
Yeah.
Now, 2 weeks from tonight, you are going to be on the television. The numbers are going to be coming in. You're probably settling in for a very long night. What's the longest you've ever been on consecutively without stopping, by the way?
I think it's 45 hours.
Wow.
Wow.
We should check we're into the Guinness Book of World Records. We should look into that, right?
Yeah.
And see if he qualifies. 45 hours. So you wanted to know, Ethan, when you're on all that time.
Do you even get a minute to sleep?
Well, so yeah, the last election in 2020, the election was on a Tuesday, and we didn't know the winner of the election until Saturday. So there was a lot of time between Tuesday and Saturday, and you kept on getting during the week, every few minutes from some state or some other state, you get more votes kind of added. You released, you learn, there's 5,000 more votes counted in Kansas, in whatever state it is, and let's see who's winning these. And so I was doing that all week. I was able to get a couple of naps in, but I'll tell you, when the election was over in 2020 and I went home that night, I think I fell asleep at about 6:30 p.m. and I didn't wake up until like 11 a.m. the next day. I've never slept that much in my life.
So we have one last question for you. You're a brilliant mind. You know everything in that head of yours. There's information about every area of this country, but people are fascinated by your pants. People, you got known a couple elections ago for wearing khaki pants. Ethan, you have no problem wearing the same pants every day, right?
No.
In fact, you like to, right? If you're wearing pants at all.
Yeah.
So people got obsessed with you wearing khaki pants every day, and people have noticed that you have stopped wearing the khaki pants so much, and we want to know what the deal is, right?
Yeah.
You've been wearing blue a lot.
Yeah. Well, let me turn the question around. Let me ask Ethan, do you wear khaki pants?
Not so much. You're more of a sweatpants guy, right? Sometimes. What's your favorite kind of pants? Do you like sweatpants?
Yeah. Sweatpants.
More sweatpants, more comfortable. Yeah. So I found pants that are a little bit more comfortable, I think, and that's what I've been wearing.
All right. So there's no big story beyond that. So I think there's more meat on the school prom story that we'll
Oh, that's I brought that one up so fast. It's like I've been thinking about it every day for the last 30 years.
Oh, Ethan's jumping in with one more last question. Oh, you want to know about how he manages to stay up so late? Like, what does he do to keep his energy up?
Yeah, because you stopped drinking Coke. Why did you stop drinking Coke?
Oh, I used to drink a Diet Coke. I would drink Diet Coke because Diet Coke has caffeine in it, and caffeine gets you very energetic. And so I used to drink that a lot. But then I started drinking coffee, and coffee also has a lot of caffeine in it, probably more caffeine in it. So I drink a lot of coffee now, and I really don't drink Diet Coke anymore, but I also get a lot of energy from it. But I got to be honest with you, it's not coffee, it's not caffeine that keeps me awake during an election. It's just, to me, it's that exciting. There's a lot of suspense. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to find out. And it's really exciting just to kind of see it, slowly kind of come into focus.
We are going to be rooting for you. We'll be watching you 2 weeks from tonight. You and obviously you don't do this alone. Your longtime producer, Adam Naboa, better known as the bearded producer, who you can catch on camera occasionally. Steve Kornacki, follow him on X at Steve Kornacki. Read his book, The Red and the Blue, if you want to know why we got here to how things are today. That's for the parents. Your podcast, The Revolution. Anything else you're promoting today to the fans of
the kids edition of The Red and the Blue? No, I'm kidding.
There should be an illustrated kids version coming out soon. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ethan, for having me on your show.
Ethan, what do you want to plug before we say goodbye?
Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram and buy merch.
And buy merch. Ethan and Daddo.com. You can link to all of that stuff. Thank you, Steve. Good luck.
All right. Thanks, guys.